Welcome to Duo Reality Podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Blends, and today I challenge you to take a relationship assessment. Starting off, I've got Mrs. Morgan Solis, aka motivational speaker, momtrepreneur, and a very, very dear person in my life. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here. You've been a really integral part of me on the journey of doing the podcast. So I'm excited that you're on not our first episode, but we're doing our first episode together. So Morgan's actually going to be on the podcast a few more times this season with a few different subjects, but that's because she's just a trusted advisee and she's one of the main people that I go to for advice about a lot of things. She's got a lot to say, so let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was obviously the last episode, aka the first episode of Duo Reality. I talked about expectations and not only removing expectations, but when having expectations in the form of boundaries and when you're taking a relationship assessment. And when I was talking about expectations, I had actually brought up the concept of cups and filling cups. Mm-hmm. And this concept I actually got from Morgan. And we had many a conversation after Jen had passed away. But one of the number one things that really stuck out to me was this analogy, this metaphor of having empty cups that need to be filled, and these are like categorical cups. So I want to ask you, where did you get that concept from?
I actually had gone through spiritual counseling about 5 years ago through a group called Open My Eyes Ministries, and my mentor Kendra had introduced me into that concept. And then there's also a concept of love languages, which comes from a book that I honestly haven't read, but I know the concept of it because I've taken like the tests and stuff to find out what your love languages are and finding out the way that you interact with people. Mm-hmm. It could be, your significant other, but it also could be people in your life too. There's different cups that we expect others to fill for us, right? So say, for example, like you explained on your last podcast, on your first episode, which was amazing. If you haven't watched it yet, you need to watch it because everything she has to say is like really gold. So on her last episode, she's talking about how she had certain expectations of people, and because they weren't being met, she was feeling unfulfilled, in those areas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that can be with your mom, that can be with your husband or your significant other, that could be with a sibling or a best friend even. Mm-hmm. We all hold certain people to certain expectations, and sometimes they're not in the right place to be able to fill that. And so for me, I have learned that in all of my relationships, that sometimes if I'm feeling unfulfilled in that relationship, I have to take a step back and think about why I'm feeling unfulfilled. Because if it's something that I'm expecting them to provide for me and they're not providing it for me, then I need to reassess that, because that might not be something that they can provide for me at that moment. And it's hard sometimes. Mm-hmm. I had high expectations of my mom before, mm-hmm. And that hindered our relationship from being closer. We could have been way closer way sooner if I didn't have expectations of her to be a certain way. And as there was a time where she would be coming to me, with problems, or because she valued my opinion, which is a great thing to have from your mom. That's something that, I think maybe a lot of people might want, is to have that type of relationship where your mom can come to you with their problems. But there was a time where I was like, I don't want to hear your problems. I'm your daughter. Mm. Mm-hmm. You need to be strong for me. I don't need to be strong for you. Mm. But that's an expectation that I put on her. And because of that expectation, we weren't able to be as close. And so I actually, by Kendra, the mentor I was talking about, I actually lived with her. And there was a time where she's like, you are really mean to your mom. Mm. And I was like, no, not, she's annoying. Like, isn't everyone's mom annoying? Like, doesn't everyone have that issue? And she's like, no, you're mean to her. We need to process that, because you're going, like, it's something that you need to deal with. And I didn't understand at the time. But when we went down to process that, and I had to give that to God, and God actually showed me that the things that my mom were dealing with were the same things that I was dealing with, and they ended up being a generational thing, where it's like the things that my mom had issues with that we clashed on, it's something that was deep seated in our family that needed to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that moment I dealt with that, and I was able to, for me, it humanized my mom. So I didn't have that expectation of her to be this certain thing here, there, and whatever, because she's my mom and I love her, and she can just be who she is, and I don't have to expect anything from her. And now we're so much closer. We talk almost every day. I tell her almost everything, and it's such a better thing now, because I'm not holding her to these expectations of what she is. She's allowed to be who she can be. And now I'm a safe place for her.
Yeah.
And, and even though she's my mom and she came before me, all that means is she came before me. It doesn't make her any better than me. It doesn't make the expectation of who she should be as a person any higher. She is who she's meant to be. And now I can love her for who she is, and we can have that open relationship, and that will fill that cup.
I think it's really actually kind of beautiful, your relationship with your mom now, because I remember back in the day. And I mean, of course, I grew up the way that I grew up. And so seeing that when I would go to your house and seeing how loving that your mom was, or at least that she tried to be, I would be like, honestly, I would get like a little jealous, because I'd be like, wow, here's somebody who cares. Like, your mom really cared about you. And she was kind of strict too at times. And you were just like this rebellious just person, like rebellious in the.
I wasn't that rebellious, but go ahead.
Okay. Rebellious in the way that you just had your own opinion, and you were not afraid to voice that opinion. Right. And that's one of the things that I loved about you. Let's go back a little bit. I want to talk about what are the different categories of cups that you have, first of all.
Okay.
Because I think when we're talking about cups, we're talking like categorical cups. These are cups within yourself that you need to be successful and feel good about yourself. So for example, and feel loved. So for example, the cup that she's talking about, she had a cup for this parental figure, for this mom figure. And in her mind, her mom was supposed to be this specific type of person and fill this specific type of cup in a certain way. And because her mom didn't not only fill the cup, but didn't meet up the expectation of this version of a mom that she was supposed to have, they had that friction constantly. And so you had to change not only your expectation of your mom, but how did you have that cup filled? The original cup of what you thought of the mother cup, the maternal cup, and how did you change the cup, or did you? I'm confused as to how that worked.
Well, for example, for me, the cup always has to be filled by God. The whole concept of any other person being able to fill your cup is really just illusional.
Gotcha.
Because you can't expect someone else to be the fulfillment in your life. You can't, no matter what role they play in your life, even if it's your significant other, even if it's, you're like the person you look up to the most in your life and they can do no wrong in your eyes, there's always going to be something they fall short of. And you can't ever expect a human person to fill that cup or fill that void or whatever void you might have. So when we're talking about cups, we're talking about voids. We're talking about, those expectations, those things that you yearn for, the things that you need inside that you're not getting. Now, for me, the only way that could ever be filled was if I went to God for it. And so when I went in and I processed my mom and I asked God to fill this cup for me, he humanized my mom and showed me who she was from the inside out, instead of me seeing her from the facade of what a mom is supposed to be.
Ooh, okay. I see what you mean there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of what it is. And when you're talking about filling cups and you're talking about relationships, it's kind of like a checks and balances, right? Like if I do this, then you expect someone else to counter it, right? Like, or you give out love, right? You're giving love to someone, and when you're giving that out, you're expecting something back. But sometimes you kind of have to not have that expectation of
Right.
getting something back, and understanding that what you put out and what you give is enough, and God's going to replenish that. God's going to fill that cup.
I see. You know, actually, this reminds me of that. I listened to that podcast that you sent me yesterday of her saying, that she gives money, or when she gives money, she doesn't carry cash on her. So I'm going to have to plug, what's the Manifestation Babe?
Manifestation Babe, yeah.
Yeah, Manifestation Babe podcast. She sent me this podcast yesterday. And she talks about how she doesn't carry cash on her. And I thought that was so, it was just so interesting to me because I don't carry cash on me either. And when I have cash, I know that I have cash for a reason. So she doesn't carry cash on her because and just ends up giving it to homeless people, or ends up giving it to people, whoever she sees fit. Not that she sees fit, but whoever she feels moved to give the money to. And she would oftentimes just end up not having cash anyways, because she would just give it to whoever. And she was giving several examples of people who were around her who were like, why would you do that? Why would you give money to somebody? Oh my God, why would you give money to that homeless person? Like, you have no idea what they're going to do with that money. And this is the same concept that I have especially when it comes to money, is it's not my responsibility what they do with that money when I give it to them. It was my responsibility to give it to them.
Yeah.
It was on my heart. It's my karma. What I do when I give it to them, what happens after that money leaves my hands is not my responsibility, is not my karma, and it's their choice. And so it's kind of the same thing when you're talking about right now, you're talking about, giving love. And when you're filling cups, if I'm able to fill someone's cup, regardless of whether I'm getting something back from it, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's not on me what they do with that energy, like that text message I had sent to a girl. Where I felt like I had to send a text message to somebody who I love and adore and appreciate, but just was not rubbing me. We were just not connecting. And it was kind of the end of an era, I guess. But I felt like I had to send one last text message, just trying to be an olive branch, trying to mend the situation. And it went exactly what I thought it was going to go, which was left.
But you did your part.
But I had to do my part, because I was like, you know what? I'm feeling it in my heart where I just have to do my part and extend the olive branch. What they do from there is not my responsibility. And I was okay with whatever outcome came with it. And the same thing with giving money, same thing with, spending time with somebody. Whatever cup that I feel I'm capable of filling is I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like before I even knew the concept of like having expectations or filling cups and things like that, I already had that expectation when it came to friends. Because my entire life, I've always been the friend that always like wants to put everything into my friends. Like, I always want to be there for them. I'm always there for them no matter what. And I always felt like I wasn't getting back what I was expecting. I wasn't getting back the same energy that I was putting out, right? Like, I would go and be this certain friend, and I would feel like, they would be this friend to other people, but not to me. And then it would hurt my feelings, and I would feel sad, and I would feel isolated and all this stuff. But early on, I figured it out that it's like, I don't need to expect anything back from anyone.
Right.
The love that I give to someone shouldn't be with expectation in return. I shouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to be your friend, but you have to do this in order to keep my friendship. If I'm going to be there for you, it's because I love you. If I'm going to be your friend, it's because I want to be there for you. And if you're not able to be there for me the same way that I'm there for you, then, I hope one day you can be, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm doing my part.
Right.
And in life, I've had some of the best friends that come into my life in the most unexpected times, that are there for me, that are just like spiritually people that have lifted me up and been there for me. And I can go days without talking to them. We don't have to see each other all the time. Like, when we're really great friends, and the people are there for me like that. And so I feel like with having that expectation, it allowed to open that up for the right people to come into my life. Because sometimes those friends that I was expecting to be as committed to me as I was to them were not the right people that are supposed to be in my life. They were people who are meant to be on part of my journey, but they're not my lifetime friend.
Oof. Okay, so now that we've established the concept of categorical cups, I want to talk a little bit more about your tribe. So this episode, I really want to get into a relationship assessment. And I think the concept of the categorical cups is a great foundation, because when you're thinking about an assessment, you need to know who's filling what cup, right? So for just to start off, how has your tribe, if it has changed, how has your tribe changed since you've developed this concept of assessment?
I wouldn't say that the concept changed my tribe per se, but I could say that when I'm more selective with who I share my time with, who I am and how I develop is different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily like I still have people who are part of my tribe that might not be on the same path as me, but we still can connect. I can still fill their cup, or I don't know. I can still be someone in their life that helps them, but it doesn't always mean that they're going to be someone who speaks into my life, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you just, as far as, because really the filling of the cups is not by people. It's not by friends.
Right.
It's by God. So that's where I'm getting a little bit confused as far as translating that into your tribe.
So for me, yes, I completely understand that at the end of the day, your cup should be filled by the universe, by God, by spirit, and by yourself. I'm there, right there with you. However, I do feel like there are certain people in my life. Each person in my life does help out and fill that cup as well.
Okay. So for me, what I call them are like deposits. So like if you think of love as like a bank account, right?
Okay.
There's some people who take money out. They withdraw, right? And
you did use this concept. It's coming back to me.
Yeah.
It's coming back to me.
And then there's people who deposit. So there might be some people who you can still love and they're part of your life. They're part of your tribe, but you can't spend a lot of time with them because they're constantly withdrawing without depositing.
Ain't that something? Some people call that energy vampires. That could definitely be. Yeah, I know a few of those.
Yeah, and sometimes that's just because that person might be in a dark place, and sometimes they need your love deposits to help them get out of that, right? They might benefit from that. They might be in debt already, right? And they don't have anything to give you that deposit. And so if you're surrounding yourself by people who are already putting those deposits in, then you have that energy to be able to deposit into other people's lives.
I see.
And so for me, I would say it's not necessarily that my tribe has changed based off of that, but maybe the amount of time that I spend with certain people might be different.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm in a good place and I want growth and I want, like right now, I feel like I'm at the peak of my so far of my, just ambitions and being motivated and having really big visions for my life. And in order to have those come to pass, I need people who see that vision with me. I can't be around a bunch of people who are just doubters, are going to just, well, what about this? And have you heard about that? And it's different when someone is concerned for you and said, have you thought about these cons? I know you said these pros, and I want to make sure that that's one thing.
That's accountability.
That's accountability. Accountability is good to have in friendship. And, sometimes it's not like those friends. Like, I think a lot of the reason why growing up, I was the friend that people shied away from is because I'm the one that holds you accountable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like when you're doing something that you're not supposed to do, I'm going to tell you, that's probably not right.
Oh yeah, especially if it's something that, like, for example, in our friendship, if I've told you and made it known to you that I have certain goals or I have certain things and then I do things outside of those goals, you're quick to tell me, hey girl, that's not aligning with what we talked about. That's not Atlantic, girl. I know, yeah. And not a lot of people can hear that.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can hear
that.
that.
And I had to learn that too, is that I have to choose who I do that with now. You know what I mean? Some people don't want my accountability. They don't value it. And so I have to I have to hold that in and say, you know what? This person at this time in their life, they don't want the accountability.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's fine. You know, that's their boundary.
That is their boundary. Yes. We'll talk about that next. Yes.
But, you know, it's just a matter of where you want to be in life. If you're wanting to be motivated and you have big dreams, you have big goals, and you're wanting to achieve those, you have to surround yourself with not only people who have similar visions, but at least can see yours. You know, it doesn't always have to be, you know, they always say like you are who you surround yourself with and all that. Yeah. And yeah. And Mercedes and I, like, we both think of that the same way, because it's like, well, no, because I have friends who do X, Y, and Z, and I'm not that way, or whatever the case is. And I love people. That's one thing about me, is like, I always try to find the best in everyone and try to, you know, see the gold, you know? And so I will have friends that are not on the same page as me, that don't have the vision as me, but what they get from me is going to be different from the one who does. Yeah. You know?
And they don't get as much time. That's what I'm noticing. So I feel the same way. And I think that one of the things that I do really think is, you know, I used to hate the concept of like, oh, you are who you surround yourself. I'm realizing more and more that it's not necessarily the people who are my friends that I'm more like, but I do notice that whatever phase of life that I'm in, I just attract the people who are in the same phase of life.
Right.
And for example, right now, like I do have, you know, I wouldn't say like a lot, but I do have a good amount of friends, you know, a good amount of people, and they're very mixed because I get along well with a lot of different people and who are on a lot of different paths in life. But right now, like I'm in such a certain point in my life right now where I can't afford to give them a lot of my time.
Right.
That doesn't make me any less their friend. That doesn't make me any less. I'll be there the second that you call me. Like I'm still there for you, and I'm here. But a lot of times they don't want to be around me. I've had people tell me, you know, you're just too positive. I've literally had people tell me I can't be like, you're just too positive, and I don't need that energy right now. Okay. Listen, you're doing me a favor, because I can't afford to not
that negative. Like what?
Yes.
Sorry.
I can't afford to be in that space either. And I noticed that, you know, like I'm attracting more people who are on the same wavelength as me in this point of my life right now. And I think I always have, depending on what point in life is. That's why so many different people are just attracted to my energy, because if I'm negative, I'm negative. It's out. Like it's all bad. But when I'm here and I'm positive and I'm present and I want to be in life, like I attract that same energy. And I have a lot of goals. And now that I've really, really allowed myself to want to be here and be on this planet and have a future and really like move towards my purpose in life, I feel like I'm attracting that same energy. And that's why I'm glad that we're together a lot more. We've always had a good relationship, but we're around each other nonstop and we live together now.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
we pretty much live together now. No, but we're around each other like all the time. And I think it's because we're both along the same goals. And even though we might not have the same exact goal, the energy is the same. And talking about this, I want to talk about boundaries. Obviously, when you're dealing with someone like you and myself, who are very compassionate people, who are very loving people, there has to be a boundary. You have to have your own boundaries within yourself, because people are just going to want to feed off of your energy and be these energy vampires and want your attention. And it just happens. How do you set boundaries? Because you're such a compassionate, loving person. How do you assess someone? Where do you draw the line when somebody is draining you? Like how does that assessment go for you? What's that process like?
I think for me, it just all depends on the way that it's received. So if someone's calling me and they're like, oh, my car broke down and my boyfriend and I are fighting again, and I'm really not speaking about anyone specific. I'm just thinking of whatever comes on top of my head. But like where it's just constantly negative, right? Where you're just like, okay, so me being who I am, I'm going to say, so what's going on inside? Like I'm going to kind of try to dig deep into the root cause of the issue so we could figure out the solution. I'm a solution person. And so if at that point you're not trying to hear what I have to say and you just want to stay stuck in that negative mind space and you just want to be where you are, probably going to back off a little bit. Because sometimes people, like I said, I had to learn. Sometimes people don't want that from me at that moment, and that's not what they're looking from me. So maybe they just need someone to listen to them. So I will listen to them, but then I just kind of know I need to make sure that when I am listening to them, that I have been deposited, that I have been, my cups have been filled, and I'm not in a place, because you might get off the phone with that person and then now you're like, now your car's breaking down and now all this is coming. Like, it's just, it's interesting to see like the people that you're around and the things that you allow yourself to open up to, they affect you, a lot, and it's kind of, to the point where if I notice that it's affecting the way that I think, the way that I operate, and I'm feeling drained, then I need to reevaluate. Yes. It's not necessarily meaning that person is bad or that they're not my friend or I don't love them anymore. That might just mean that I need to pray for them on my own time and hope that whatever's going through in their heart, in their whatever I'm saying to them at that moment, they might not be listening that moment. Whatever I'm saying might resonate later, and they can be someone later on, be someone that I can interact with more. Right. Because sometimes that person's just going through that crazy thing. And usually those people are like those type of people who want to talk to you and then they pull away and then they don't talk to you for a long time. And that really used to hurt my feelings. When someone would go to you for advice or they're your friend and you guys are interacting and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they just ghost you. Like I've had a lot of friends that do that to me.
I do that. I'm very guilty of that.
Yeah.
I'm very guilty of that. Yeah.
But I realize that sometimes but first of all, I realize it's not personal. Yes. So I think that's a boundary that I had to learn is to see past the physical and understand that people are going through things that have nothing to do with me, and not everything is about me.
Man, yes.
Because I think sometimes, you I don't know, I won't say you. I'll say I have a self-centered type of mindset where I'm like, well, did I say something wrong? Or, are they mad at me? Or I can't believe that they wouldn't talk to me after all I've done for them. And it has absolutely nothing to do with me. That's the way they cope with their issues. That's the way that they, are able to sometimes they just need to separate themselves from people to gain their energy. That's the way they are able to, replenish themselves. And so I had to learn that it has nothing to do with me and not take it personally and just say, you know what, I'm going to give them their space. I'm going to pray for them. And whenever you come to me, I'm here for you. Right. But it's kind of just learning because everyone's telling you something. Yeah. Always. You kind of have to just learn how to listen and not just with your ears,
and see the other side of the reality. First, you see the first reality, which is the physical, and then you go deeper. That's where dual reality comes in, by the way.
Yeah, and it's true. And it's 90% of the time, the things that when it comes to interactions with people, it's not going to be their physical reality that you're dealing with. You're going to be dealing with that spiritual reality. You're dealing with people who are operating out of their false realities, because sometimes there's things that go on in your childhood and you have trauma and you have things that happen and you're living out of those hurts and those pains, and you don't realize that because it's such a long time ago. Oh, well, that was a long time ago. That doesn't hurt me anymore. Man, but really, most of the time, people, that's how people operate. They operate out of their pain and their trauma, and it resonates in relationships. And then you have a friend who's been through XYZ, up and down, around the corner, like just the worst things in life, and I'm like, I'm here. I'm trying to be there for you. I'm trying to love you. But maybe they don't know how to be loved. Maybe it makes them feel uncomfortable that I'm loving them because in their life, people who love them have only wanted things from them.
Ooh. Yeah, I think that's an amazing point to be made. And I feel a lot of the same way because you're just resonating with me a lot because I do feel that way. And I think that I got worse at ghosting people, my friends especially, after Jim passed away. And I just, especially after Jim passed away, my mom passed away, like the two of my biggest people in my entire life were gone. And it was just a lot. And I felt like, being an empath, I didn't realize that my emotions were really, really high and I was attracting people with high emotions as well. And I was feeding off of, I wouldn't say feeding, but I was feeling everybody's emotion. And I was already in such a space that I was already high on emotion. Like my emotions were already really, really high and I was high energy. And so anybody who was in that space who also was high energy, whether it was positive or negative, it was a lot. It was a lot to take on. And there would be times where I'd have to be alone for days, weeks. You know what I'm saying? And like, I always felt bad, I guess, because there were some people, my best friend you were at my house every day too after Jim passed away, but like there would be weeks I couldn't talk to anybody. Like I didn't want to leave my room. And like even now I still find that it takes me a long time like I need my space. And it's something I didn't realize about myself because being younger, I used to want to
always be around people.
I used to always want to be around everybody. And like, I wanted to be all up under everybody. And I don't want that anymore. My boundaries are a lot different than they used to be. And that's what I think for me, that's where, when you're talking about the other reality, that's where spirit comes in for me. So I think about you, and I know you have a pretty high intuition. I too have a high intuition, or I'm just really in tune with my intuition, I should say. And so I do see past when I'm thinking of a boundary or I'm assessing relationships, I'm thinking like, now I have a deeper understanding of spirit and of the other realities and of how people are feeling. And so I really have to check my ego a lot. I have to check my ego because I do feel that sometimes too, where I'm like, yo, I texted this person like 4 hours ago. They texted me back immediately. And then I texted them back immediately. And then it's been 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. It's been 2 days.
That person might have just taken a nap, or
right, exactly.
Maybe they're in the hospital, or hopefully not. But you know what I mean. Like you never know.
There's something else going on, right?
It has nothing to do with you.
It has nothing to do with me, and I think that's what a relationship assessment and a self-assessment does. When I talk about filling cups, or like you said, the deposits, I think of it as filling cups. I like the concept of cups because they're categorical for me. And when I'm able to put things in categories, I know not a lot of things fit in categories. I know that's for sure. But when I'm able to name an emotion, when I'm able to name a void, name a feeling, and pinpoint what it is, then I'm able to then address it, right? And so for me, like in the example that I had given in my expectations, I had this role, I'll say, for this person. And I realized that role was never going to be filled the way that I wanted it to. That expectation was never going to happen the way that I had in my head. And so I had to check my own ego and say, that's just not for me. That's just not something that I don't want to say it's not something that I could have, but I have to learn to live without that and let people just be who they are.
Well, yeah, I had to reassess when you were going through that time, because when you went through that time when you were pulling away, that's when I had my first daughter.
Yes.
And so for me, to be honest, during that time, it was like I wanted you to be there. You know what I mean? Because you're such an important person in my life. And you're one of the first people I told I was pregnant.
Morgan, don't cry.
I'm not going to cry.
You look like you're crying.
I'm not crying.
Okay, you better not be.
No, but, and this is a moment where I had to check my ego. Okay. So it was Lehua's first birthday. And Mercedes decided not to come, but she also just like texted me like after the party was pretty much over and let me know. Right. And at that moment, I'm like, dude, you couldn't have just let me know the morning of. You couldn't have just, and I started going through all these things. I was there for you. I love you, and then I had to stop and say, you know what? I've never been through anything that she's gone through. And it was very horrible what she had to endure. And I was there with her at her very exact lowest point. So I know exactly how bad, it was. So who am I to judge her on whether or not she's there for me? She's still going through something so crazy. And even though it was about a year since he had passed away, at Alehua's birthday was around the time that he had passed. So and that didn't even dawn on me, because I'm planning my daughter's birthday. It's her first birthday and all these things, and instead of thinking, Mercedes is going through all this stuff, I need to give her some grace because she's in pain. The first thing I thought was, why aren't you there for me? I'm there for you.
Right.
And that's where I had to really reevaluate and say, you know what? This isn't about me. Mm-hmm. This isn't about Lehua. This isn't about anything that has to do with me and my family. This has to do with Mercedes and her pain. And so I just need to be there for her, and I need to just love on her anyways. And now where are we? You know what I mean? Like, now we're together all the time. Now she sees my daughter every day. My daughter may be a little brat to her sometimes.
It's okay. She's getting there.
But now she's working on building a really great relationship with Lehua. And Lehua's going to be, Mercedes is going to be someone that Lehua looks up to and, and sees and is like, oh, I want to be like my Auntie Merc. That's what it's going to be like. Had I just wrote her off and said, you know what, Mercedes, you weren't there for me. And look how much I've been there for you. And how dare you? Mm-hmm. And I just wrote her off and exited from her life. How much would I lose for doing that? From being so selfish and not thinking about things from the other side of the story. Because there's always two sides to the story. And most of the time, it's not about you. It's about whatever's going on in that person's heart. Mm-hmm. You good?
Yeah, I'm good. It's just, it's interesting to me because sometimes I feel like, sometimes I feel like I just, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I feel sad for that person that I was in that space, And I also sometimes, I was very much in just pain. And so I didn't see how other people were affected. All I could focus on was not spreading that pain. Mm-hmm. That was my only goal. That was the only thing that I can think of. And I just, I never wanted to lash out at anybody, and I never did. I never wanted to be the Debbie Downer. And it was really, really hard for me at that time to celebrate anything at all. And so because I didn't want to just spread the negativity and spread what I was going through, because I knew in my heart that I was going to get through it. I knew that God was going to pull me through. I knew that he was going to find a way. And obviously there was a reason for me to still be on this planet. Mm-hmm. But I just remember thinking, I do not want to spread this to anybody else. And sometimes I feel sad for her because, it sucks that I wasn't able to go to Lehua's first birthday party, but I'll be at her second and her third and her fourth and her fifth and
her 25th and
exactly
21st
and so it does. Even I was telling you this the other day, how it makes me sad sometimes that like that's one of the reasons why I was so excited that we're spending so much more time together and that we live closer together, because I get to have that relationship with her that I really, really wanted, and develop that. And she's still young enough that I think maybe she'll give me some grace, although she's really mean to me. She's really mean to me.
She really is.
But it's okay.
But you had to feel your emotions and allow yourself to be in that place to get to where you are now, mm-hmm. And so,
we're not going to get into that part yet, because that's a whole other episode.
Okay.
That's literally a whole other episode.
Okay.
I want to stick to the boundaries and the relationship assessments. Okay. So to wrap up, we talked about your cups, relationship assessment we talked about categorical cups and how to use that concept with your relationship assessment. And also the analogy of the bank and having people who's depositing into your energy and who's withdrawing from your energy. And then we talked a little bit about boundaries, right? And giving your friends some grace and giving people some grace. To wrap it up in a nice little bow for you. Okay. Basically, what we're saying here is utilize or first assess yourself and see what it is that you are needing. What's your void? What are you missing? What are the things that you find yourself craving? And this can change throughout different phases of your life. And then first, like Morgan said, learn how to fill that void with either yourself, with your spirit, with God, with whatever you believe in. There is a higher power, and it's all around us, and it is us. So learning to fill that void and not have it be put on somebody else. Then when you're assessing your relationships with your friends and your family and your tribe, the people that are around you, it's really important that you assess, first of all, are they withdrawing energy from you on a daily basis? How much are they withdrawing? Are they depositing energy into you, into your relationships? Where's the effort at? And like Morgan said, I really like the idea of you don't have to cut people off, especially we all go through different phases in life. You don't have to completely cut people off, but you maybe have to limit some time with some people. And that's okay too. And then we talked about boundaries. Boundaries are really important. And I think of boundaries as the foundation. Boundaries is the line in the sand that we don't cross. And then expectation is rising to the occasion. So I feel like once you've established a conversation, once you've established a relationship with somebody, then you can talk about expectations. Like we have a boundary, now we can talk about expectation. So for example, in our relationship, I feel like we do have our boundaries and we learn our boundaries often. I think so. And I think it's really important that we voice those boundaries. And then we have our expectation of each other. And we're okay to have expectation of each other because we've discussed it. We've talked about it. We talk about them all the time. And we nurture them, right? So one of my expectations of you is that you hold me accountable to a lot of things. And the way that I think part of the way that I consent to that is I listen to what you say, right? And I tell you things and I allow you to tell me the other things.
Right. Because if you tell someone you want them to hold you accountable and then they hold you accountable and then they ghost you because you're holding them accountable, then that expectation that they put of you, you know what I mean? You're not holding up to it. So if you're putting an expectation out of someone to be some way, then you better be ready for when they hold themselves up to that expectation.
Right. So you're saying if my expectation of you is that you're going to hold me accountable, then I need to make sure that I'm actually living up to you or allowing you to do that.
Sometimes you might, you're human. So like I have to understand that she's not perfect. I'll hold her accountable, but sometimes the things that she might be doing might not be in alignment with what I'm holding her accountable for. Right. That's fine. What is not okay is if I'm trying to hold you accountable and now you're annoyed of me because I'm holding you accountable and now you're hiding things from me or you're leaving me on red. You know what I mean? Because, I don't want to talk to her because she's going to hold me accountable and I did this thing that, I'm not supposed to do, whatever the case is. That's when those expectations are not, you know what I mean? Like they're not being met. So that's the dangerous part of holding expectations, I guess I should say, of people. Because if you're going to hold an expectation of someone, then, and you have that conversation, then just be ready for what comes from it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think part of that too is if I ever get to the point where I shy away from that and I shy away from the expectation and the accountability, then that means I'm not really in a good place, right? Because I trust you enough to hold me to that accountability, to hold me to the expectation. And it's not an expectation that you have of me. It's an expectation of I have of me that I've let you know and that I've changed and that I've asked you to hold me accountable to. So I think that's what's the important part is that it's a mutual agreement, right? So if we get to the point where now I have an expectation of myself, I let you know of that expectation, of myself that I want to be held accountable to, and I'm asking you to hold me accountable to that expectation, and then I fall short of that expectation on a consistent basis, where now it's starting to affect my behaviors and my energy and how I am as a person. And now I'm like, the expectations are there for a reason for myself. We know this about myself. So if I get to that place, then that's when you have to be like, okay, yeah, I think that it might be time that I have to pull away from you. And that's your every right to do that, right? And vice versa, same thing. I think that's important. Okay, so to finish off, one of the things that I really believe in, one of the biggest aspects about dual reality, we're talking about the reality within yourself and the outer reality. There's so many different realities going on all the time, right? So what I do is I challenge my listeners, I challenge my viewers to do life from the inside out, to really hone in and focus on themselves, to find their purpose and to really live in it. That's my challenge for them, because a lot of people, it's kind of like that concept of when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put a mask on first before you help somebody else. Right. That's the concept of dual reality. So how do you challenge your supporters or the people in your life to live life?
I always start with, I'm an inner healing person. So I always start with what is, like, if you have a problem, we get down to the root cause, and the root cause is always built by unforgiveness. And so we find where you have unforgiveness or hurt, whatever hurt you're stemming from, and we forgive. And once you forgive, you allow that to be filled, and that's plucked from the root. So that way you're not feeling that void is not there anymore. So a lot of times when you have friends and they're hurting your feelings, it has nothing to do, again, with them. Yeah. It has to do with a pain or an insecurity or something that you've dealt with your entire life that is deeply rooted inside you. And so what I challenge the people in my life to do is find that root and pluck it, and find where there needs to be forgiveness, and forgive. And sometimes that doesn't mean, it's going to happen right then. You might have to journal. It might be a process, and usually it is a process. But once you have that healing and you have that forgiveness and you release it, then that doesn't have power over you anymore. And the way that other people affect you are going to they're going to have a lot less power over you.
Ooh, yes, I love that. I think that's a huge part of inner healing. Fantastic. Okay, so I got this quote actually from Instagram from Third Eye Thoughts. I also posted it in my mantras I also posted it in my mantras highlight on my personal page at Mercedes Blends with 2 Z's. So it says, may the overthinking and the doubt exit your mind right now. May clarity replace confusion. May peace and calmness fill your life. You have been strong long enough. It's time to start receiving your blessings. You deserve it. Thanks for watching this episode of Dual Reality Podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Blends. I have with me Morgan Solis, and we just want to say, have a great day. Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of Dual Reality Podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Blends. If you found this episode to be enlightening, to be empowering, please feel free to share, comment, subscribe to however you're listening to it right now. If you feel moved to donate, please check out the website dualrealitypodcast.com. And I hope you have a great day. You got this.